Uh, on behalf of Wegman Hessler, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. My name is Larry Crowther, and Art Lundberg and Sachin will be presenting some high-level information regarding the Ohio Small Business Grant Program. Before starting that discussion, I want to address 2 points regarding the status of PPP loans. The first one is that depending on the date that the funds were received by the borrower, banks are beginning to accept the forgiveness applications. Our understanding is that most businesses are able to apply 100% of the proceeds towards salary and wages, which makes the form very simple. And if that's going smoothly, that's great. If you have any questions, let us know. And then the second point is somewhat discouraging, that the PPP loan itself provides that the forgiveness of the loan, which might otherwise be taxable, is not taxable, but the IRS has taken a position that the expenses paid with the loan proceeds are not deductible. There's been discussions in Congress to clarify this correction, but at this point, that correction has not been enacted. And then with regard to this program in particular, our program is focused on for-profit businesses. The Ohio program also establishes a fund for nonprofit businesses, and I think anyone that's a nonprofit is welcome to stay on. I think there'll be some useful information regarding the application process, but we don't have any information yet because the state has not issued any guidance on the application process or the details for nonprofit grants. So if anyone's interested in that, you can either send one of us an email or go into the chat room if you're a nonprofit. And once we have information from the state of Ohio, we can follow up with you with a communication. Otherwise, Art and Sachin will now provide information regarding this grant program.
Thank you, Larry. Yeah, Sachin and I will try to walk you through some slides here today. These will not be hugely substantive. They'll be more process oriented. This is more about trying to get you guys understanding what you need to do to put yourself in a position. So if you want to get the $10,000 grants at, 10 a.m. Monday morning, November 2nd, sorry, you'll be in a position to do it. Just to round out a little bit here, this is part of a program for CARES Act. It's an Ohio allocation of about $419.5 million that is broken down, as you can see in this chart here below. What we're going to talk about in this situation is really the small business piece, and you can see the box that's there. There's $125 million of the $419 allocated there. We're also going to talk a little bit about the bars and restaurant piece, which is another $37.5 million is there. In this presentation, we're not going to talk about the nonprofits, but we will probably come back with something when we hear more detail on that. So, Sachin, why don't you go to the next slide? Thanks. So, in terms of being eligible for this 125 million or a piece of it, and nobody's going to get more than 10 except for an exception in a restaurant perhaps. You have to hit these criteria just to get the ball rolling. So when you want to go do this, you need to think about yourself in terms of your business. First of all, needs to be for profit. You have to have at least one employee, but no more than 25. The date you're going to measure that by is going to be January 1, 2020. You can meet that, I believe, 2 ways, Sachin, if you correct me if I misstate this, but you can have, for example, 24 or 25 people on your payroll, or you might have 26, 27, 28, but as long as that group as a whole is a full-time equivalent of no more than 25, you can still qualify. And that is correct, right. And that is, again, as of January 1, 2020. So one of the good things is, maybe if you have a seasonal business where in July you have 35 employees, you could still do this if at January 1 you only had 25, is the way we're reading this now. You need to have a physical location in Ohio, which probably is not going to be an issue for a lot, but you have to generate 90% of your annual revenue in Ohio and taxable in Ohio. So the issue has come up, what if I sell some of my products or services outside of the state of Ohio? That should not be a huge issue as long as that revenue is generated in Ohio. You ship the product if it was, and the income is deemed derived in Ohio. You would have a problem if you had multiple locations, right? And you had a place in Indiana, for example, and you were delivering services from there. That could be a problem for you. But for most companies, as long as you're only in Ohio, you should not have a problem with this. You need to have been in operation as of January 1 with continuous service through the application date. The exceptions are if you had to shut down a little bit. You also need to, go ahead, Sachin. Oh, I thought you said something, sorry. You need to have experienced revenue loss related to COVID, which I don't think would be difficult for most people, but that is one of the requirements. If you're going to apply for the grant, you need to be in good standing with the Secretary of State of Ohio, Department of Tax, and any other government entity that kind of gives you a little bit of a business license. So you got to kind of get your ducks in a row and your house in order if you have any of those issues. And then last but not least, you need to have exhausted all your other grants and loans, for example, your PPE loans and things like that. So that's just the basic elements of, if you want to go forward with this program, you need to fit into those eligibility requirements. On top of that, even if you hit all of those, there are certain things that you can't be, right? And so there's a list here that I will not read through in total, but it's things like country clubs, what we call sin groups of businesses, adult industry, gambling, tobacco, alcohol, other than bars and restaurants. And then they also exclude some of the things that relate to getting grants and other programs as well on that list. And it will be part of the materials. So you got to just make sure you're not in one of those as well. You want to go ahead there, Sachin, and go to the next? Thank you. On top of that, another eligibility requirement, which should be pretty easy, I believe, is that you need to be able to use your funds to fund them for these costs, like PPE type things. I'm sorry, back up a little bit. These are things that if you do spend it on, much like you did in the PPE programs, if you use those, that would be eligible to spend the $10,000 on. And in fact, the PPE is there: mortgage, interest, utilities, salaries and wages, anything else. It does not appear that Ohio is trying to make you stretch too hard to use the $10,000. And I think that's an easy one in our mind that most people should be able to do. You want to go ahead? Again, much like the PPE loans had restrictions on what you could use them for, there's a list again that you can't do. Non-COVID related, can't use them to pay your taxes, business, non-business purposes. You've probably heard about the Lamborghini and all that kind of stuff out in the media where people tried to do that. You also can't, you cannot use this to kind of double dip with respect to another source of a government loan or program or anything else that you have on this. And it has to be new and incremental, if you will. And in the same way we gave advice for the PPE, document, try to show that the check came out of a fund, even if it's an internal fund that you set up for yourself, that you use this 10 grand if you get it. We'll talk about how you do it. So because you don't want this to come back and bite you. The application process is actually going to start. This is a little bit like, when we were younger and we wanted to go see our favorite band. You're going to have to log on by November 1st, November 2nd by 10 a.m. and start the application process. As we understand it right now, such as this correct, we still have not seen a sample application process, a simple application itself.
Yeah, so that is correct. We've not seen a sample application. However, as part of their terms and conditions, they have indicated some of the requirements for the application. And I think you're going to discuss them further in this slide here.
Right. There is a list of the things you need to be prepared to put together, and there's actually a link there that will bring you into those very specifics that you need. So these are some of the lists of the things that you need, and I just don't know that I want to go through all these because they're really fairly well laid out in some of the materials that are here. I don't know if there's anything anyone really needs to say about any of those things, but there are obvious things that you would always need: payroll records, income taxes, and things like that you're going to have to get yourself organized for. And go to the next slide. Let me see. Okay, so now let's talk about, if this thing starts with $125 million of a pool, nobody's going to get more than $10,000 per business general. It is a grant, which means once you get it, it's yours. You have to qualify for the grant, but unlike the PPE where you're going to actually have to apply for forgiveness, we do not see that as part of the process. What we see them doing is they will determine whether you qualify for in the application process, and then you will have to go and maintain records for what, 5 years, Sachin?
Yep, 5 years you have to maintain records.
To show that you've complied with all this. Just in terms of the breakout of this, of the 125 million, 81 million is going to be available at large. 44 million has been specifically allocated across the 88 counties in Ohio, which means that's 500 per county. And both of those are on a first come, first served basis. If what happens on November 23rd, if some of that specific county allocation has not been awarded, that will go into the at-large. From that standpoint, we anticipate that this money will go very quickly, which is why I think we just want to get people's mind around what you have to do to be logging on at 10 o'clock Monday and not thinking about it at 10 o'clock on Monday. So why don't you go, next one. So that really, those are the elements of what is here. And just to wrap up before Sachin talks a little bit about restaurant, here's what I think the checklist is, right? We need to verify that your business meets the eligibility requirements. And for that, there's that basic list that I went through in the beginning that talked about, the number of employees. You need to make sure that you're not one of those few ineligible businesses. You need to make sure that you will be able to use the money, the $10,000 under the appropriate items to spend it. To apply, you definitely need this ID to do the process when you log on. If you don't have one, you can at least get that one going. If not, dig up your login and your password. Get your documents organized. Like I said, there is that list that goes through exactly what they're going to ask for in the application process, even though we don't have the form. And, like I said, just like you were doing your favorite concert, man, be ready to log on by 10 a.m. November 2nd. And our advice is do not wait for this because we think the money will be gone very quickly. You could decide that by the time you look at all this, the $10,000 is not worth all that effort. but it is free money if you can spend it, so we think it's worth it. So we just wanted to pass these tips along with you. And with that, I want to just let Sachin talk a little bit about how the bars and restaurants work a little bit differently, but we'll go from there. So go ahead, Sachin.
So as part of the CARES Act allocation for Ohio, $37.5 million was also allocated for the Bar and Restaurants Assistance Fund. This is basically a separate program from the Small Business Relief Grant that Art talked about a few minutes ago. I mean, it's designed to assist the on-premise liquor permit holders. Basically, every award is $2,500, and it's per unique business location. So, if you're an organization, a bar, or restaurant that has more than one location, you can get $2,500 per location. What is needed is that you have a active on-premise permit as of close of business of October 23rd, 2020. That just means that you have an active permit. That does not mean that your bar or restaurant is actually open. The other thing I'd like to point out is though it's called bar and restaurant, there are several other liquor permits that are that fall under what's eligible for this program. So for instance, I have a wedding venue client, and the liquor permit, for example, that they hold does actually fall under this. So please go ahead and look at the businesshelp.ohio.gov. It gives a list of different permits that are out there that are going to be eligible for this grant. In addition, because it is a separate program, a business that's eligible for the Small Business Relief Grant can get the 10 grand from them, and then can also get the additional $2,500 per location. So because they're two separate programs, potentially you could get $12,500 if you had one business location or more, depending on how many business locations you have. The application, again, like the Small Business Relief Grant, is again going to open up on November 2nd. Unlike the other program, they haven't really said at what time the application will be available. I think part of the reason for this is there's a lot more money when you do the math. There's only about 15,000 or so, a little over 15,000 or so liquor permit holders out there, and I think the money allocated sort of satisfies that amount. And with that, I conclude my part of the presentation. And we ask that you reach out to us should you have any questions or concerns regarding any of the topics we talked about. And as Larry stated at the start of this presentation, there is another $25 million or so that's available for nonprofits, and we can talk about that a little further when we do have additional information for that program.
Gentlemen, if we wanted to get a copy of the slide deck, how do we do that?
Could you go ahead and either send either one of us an email, which our emails are up here, or go ahead and put your information down in the chat box, or send us a private chat, and we'll be happy to send over the slide deck over to you, or if you have any specific questions. One thing I did forget to mention is the Bar and Restaurants Assistance Fund. That does not have the caps on if it's a for-profit or nonprofit entity. So if you're a nonprofit entity that happens to have a liquor permit, guess what? You might be eligible for the $2,500.
So if there's any questions now, we'll be glad to try to answer them if we can. If not, we can always get back to you. So if there is anyone who has a question about this, again, it's just much about trying to encourage people to get their ducks in a row and be prepared for Monday. So. There is somebody raising their hand.
Again, how do we get a copy of this?
Either send any one of us an email, or go ahead and put in your email in the chat box, and we'll be happy to send over a copy of this PowerPoint.
Was there? That was Fadi? Did I say that reasonably correct? Okay, sorry. I thought I saw one other chat. Did I see another chat? No? Okay. Well, we do hope this is helpful to you guys all. Oh, please send, okay, just presentations. If you guys want to just take a moment and make sure you leave us with an email, we'll wait a few minutes so that you can give us your link. But if there's nothing else, we'll sign off here.
Yeah, so
How do
feel
I-
free to
how do I
follow up
leave
if you have any questions.
Go ahead, Bob.
How do I leave my email there?
If you just put in the chat, you can just put your email in the chat, or you can send it to one of us. You see how people are leaving their emails?
No, I don't see where that is.
If you go up where it says show conversation, you should be able to open up a chat, right?
Okay.
And then from there, you can just put your email in, and we will make sure we get this presentation to all you. There we go. Is the Ohio ID the same that we used for the PPP loan? I believe that the PPP loan was a federal program, so I don't know.
Probably use your employer ID number for the PPP loan and an Ohio, some kind of an Ohio ID.
Say that again, Larry.
I think they're different.
Yeah, that's what I think they are going to be different. So Ohio, I think, has a general login number for a business, which when you log that in and with your password, it kind of connects you to your different elements through tax and other areas. It's like a central login for the business activities.
Yeah, and all that information, again, is available if you go ahead and Google Ohio ID, or we can share that information when we send you over the slides and such.
I think everybody else that I saw was asking for a presentation and nothing else in terms of that. So, well.
Okay, well, thank you everybody for joining, and hopefully these funds actually are available and you can be able to use them. And we are hoping to do more of these as the technology is now available, where we can jump on these and have a quick discussion to keep you advised of any other developments for funding programs or otherwise it might be of interest. So we appreciate everybody taking their time to join us.